Hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that I'm very familiar with. I've studied it quite a bit, and that is on pronoun use, often referred to as gender hospitality or pronoun gender hospitality. In December, Ask Pastor John, that's John Piper's ministry, put out a question from an anonymous elder where they ask, should people, Christians, believers, should they actually participate in so-called pronoun gender hospitality? I'm going to give my thoughts on what John Piper has to say, and so let's get straight to it.
We got our first question about so-called gender pronoun hospitality exactly 5 years ago in December of 2019. Many emails since, most recently in this urgent question from an anonymous elder. Hello, Pastor John. Thank you for this podcast and for taking my question. I serve as an elder in my church. We are blessed with a college nearby where we have an active ministry presence. There we team up with a large parachurch ministry helping churches serve college campuses. During a recent training session, this ministry asked us to consider using gender pronoun hospitality on our local campus, a suggestion that has now come before the elders of the church to see if we will allow our members and those we support locally who work on the campus to do so. The argument is that there are times when, for the sake of evangelism, one may decide to call a person by their chosen gender if such an act removes a possible barrier in sharing the gospel. The ask for our church is for a person to have the freedom in the moment to do this, limited to evangelism contexts, limited to conversations with those who are not believers. If someone claims to be a follower of Christ, such pronoun hospitality would not apply. But Article 7 in the Nashville Statement seems to me to show no wiggle room here at all. Pastor John, what do you think of this so-called gender pronoun hospitality?
I see 5 issues that need to be addressed in this question. I'll take them from what I think is the least to the most important.
So John Piper gives 5 issues that he sees, and he's going to take them from order of importance. The first issue is when dealing directly with a person who says he is a woman or she is a man, the pronoun that you use is you, not he or she. He's basically saying you don't have to address folks that way. The pronoun you use is you. How are you? The next point, he says, even in a slogan, I think connecting the beautiful biblical word hospitality with the unbiblical concept of gender pronoun is unhelpful and misleading. So the word hospitality actually Paul says hospitality in the New Testament is a spiritual gift. So you're taking that English word and you're connecting it to an unbiblical concept, which is unhelpful, he says, and of course misleading, which some might say is actually lying to the person, right? The next point, he says the very use of the word gender is a compromise with sinful views of reality. He then goes to explain that in the 60s, the feminine movement, they moved forward with coming up with this word named gender. And they did that because gender can be flexible, whereas sex isn't flexible. Sex is what he thinks we should use for male and female and get rid of the word gender. What do you think about that? That's something that is probably hard to do in our society today, but I get his point that sex is a fixed philosophical reality, and when you introduce gender and you intertwine them, it softens that foundation a little bit. And to his point, that's probably part of the reason why we're here. In fact, he says that is why we're here in this cultural moment. His fourth point is how much of the gospel's implications and purifying power should be shared up front in evangelism. And what he's getting to here is, shouldn't you just share the gospel with people? Like, how much of the purifying power of the message of the gospel are you limiting when you participate in shenanigans like this? Let the gospel do what the gospel does. It's an offense. Jesus said, I didn't come to bring peace. I came to bring a sword. Mothers and fathers will be against their children. Children will be against their mothers and fathers. Why? Because of what Jesus said and what the moral foundation and ground which we must stand on is worth severing a relationship. Now, of course, how you do that is the point, I think. And so you don't want to be rude and you don't want to be unhospitable, and yet at the same time, let the gospel be shared and let the chips fall where they may. Hey, real quick, Michael here. Thanks for watching. It means so much. I know your time's valuable, and we'd love to have this communal aspect grow so other people can learn to clarify. And so we just ask that you like, you share, and you subscribe. It helps the channel out more than you know. Thank you so much for your support. Now, back to your video. Now, his fifth point, which depending on how you look at it, because he said he was going to go from least importance to most important, his number one, he says this: how serious is the issue when a man claims to be a woman or a woman claims to be a man? How serious is that? So he shifts from the pronoun hospitality angle, and he gets more narrow, I think, in the actual ideology of transgenderism. How serious is it? How serious is transgenderism? Which that is the, how shall we say, the root of where this pronoun hospitality conversation focuses on. And then he lists these 10 points. Number one, he says it defies God. It does. In the Garden of Eden, in Genesis, God lays out exactly man, woman. He establishes roles. And this flips it on its head. Number two, it involves living a lie. I think that in our cultural moment, if you've been paying attention, just a few days ago, Donald Trump signed the ban of men in women's sports. I think that this lie that has been propagated over the last, let's say, many years, but really intense over the last 2 to 4 years, the cultural can see it is a lie. It is a lie. Number three, underneath this, his number one point, being a man or a woman is not like being left-handed or right-handed. It goes far deeper and touches the depths of our created nature. Like I mentioned a minute ago, God established roles. There are ways in which maleness and femaleness interact in the world. For instance, men, psychologists will tell you this, it's not even questioned. It's just known. Men are more interested in things than people, and women are more interested in people than things. There's been study after study that established this. You can't start messing with the depths of the biological nature of maleness and femaleness. Number four, it regularly leads to destructive and irreversible surgeries and treatments. Irreversible. He says that on the podcast, which he's just trying to drive home. This is so serious. So very serious, and it is. We've seen, well, I've seen, if you're on Twitter or other social media, the destructive surgeries where they have castrated boys, they have removed the breasts of women, all in the name of this deceptive practice. The fifth one, when that happens, when they do those kinds of things to their body, it destroys the God-designed potential of procreation and will bring, I say will bring, not might bring, will bring sooner or later profound and sometimes suicidal regret. And we've seen case after case of people who have went through this hormonal change, altered their bodies, because you have folks lying to them in the same way that you lie about gender hospitality pronouns. just at a deeper level, push them to do this, and then they regret it, and there is no going back. Number 6, it expresses the deeply anti-God commitment to human autonomy over and against the will of God. This is 1000% true. There is no bigger expression, I guess, a human could make to God than to say, I'm in the wrong body and I'm going to do everything in my power to reverse what you did to me. Number 7, it contributes to the cultural disorder of sexuality that tends to undermine God's pattern for male and female, and thus confuses and destabilizes our young people and increases the prevalence of sexual dysphoria and treats it as a legitimate guide to future happiness, which it isn't. So John's just trying to say, like, the cultural disorder is established and predicated on this lie that this is something, transgenderism, this is something that should be pursued. It's a good and, shall I say, quote unquote, holy endeavor that the society is pushing on people, and it isn't the guide to a future happiness. It's a guide to a destructive end, and that has confused our culture, confused our young people, and destabilized the moral fabric of, I'm sitting in America, for sure, Europe, that is the case. Number 8, it overlooks alternative ways forward that take seriously a person's sexual confusion or rebellion, and yet leads people out of dissatisfaction into new hope and embrace of their God-given sexuality through Christ. In short, it overlooks alternatives to a different way. There are other ways to deal with this dysphoria that people are experiencing. There are people, very few, that are battling this feeling, and there are other ways to deal with it than surgeries and hormones, those things that cannot be reversed and lead to utter destruction. His 9th subpoint, it is the prelude to future perversions in which a person marries an animal and chooses to no longer be he or she, but now demands the pronoun it. You can just Google, and he says this, Google, there are people marrying themselves, there are people marrying their robots, there are people marrying animals. It has undermined the moral foundations of our culture, and now those things are becoming permissible. And then his last point, his number 10 point, and the one of most importance. He said, therefore, the greatest possible care should be taken before one gives any impression of approving or even being mildly disagreeable towards so-called transgenderism. Now, I like the way that he said this, because he says being mildly disagreeable, giving the impression of approving or even being mildly disagreeable. So when he says it like that, he's basically saying you should be really disagreeable on transgenderism. And if you're really disagreeable on transgenderism, then of course you will not choose to participate in the so-called pronoun gender hospitality. And he's pretty clear on don't do that. If you're a believer in Christ, trust God in the situation. Don't lie to people. Don't undermine what God might be doing in their lives. There are times in life where there's a solid anchor to truth that needs not to be severed because you think in your mind that lying to someone would be better for them in the moment so that you can then give them truth. So you lie and then give them truth. And then when they get the truth, then they'll see that when you lied to them and told them that they were a boy or a girl by using the pronoun that they so wanted, that they will then be rescued. The end does not justify the means. If you are a believer in Christ, you ought not do what Preston Sprinkle says or what college campus ministries have been doing in their parachurch ministries in the name of so-called gospel evangelism. How about we just evangelize people with the gospel in a loving way? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Please let us know what you think in the comments. I monitor those. This is a topic that has been at the height of the, shall I say, Protestant church. I don't know what's going on in the Catholic Church and in our culture at large. Should we participate in this? I, of course, agree with John Piper. Absolutely, 1000% no. Trust God to do his miracle work. But again, let me know in the comments. Please like, share, and subscribe. I am Michael Goff. This is Chronicles of Clarity, where we are here to clarify for you. Have a great rest of your day.